Hey everyone. So you know how you've been eyeing that shiny new iPhone and maybe wondering why it's taking forever to actually get your hands on one? Well, there's a very real and very significant reason for that, and it goes way deeper than just high demand or supply chain hiccups. Apple, one of the most powerful and richest companies on the entire planet, literally cannot make enough iPhones to keep up with what people want right now. So here's what's going on. We're living through what experts are calling a global semiconductor chip shortage, and it is absolutely hammering the tech industry across the board. But when it hits Apple, it hits differently because Apple moves iPhones by the tens of millions every single quarter. We're talking about a company that sold over 50 million iPhones in a single quarter not too long ago. So when there's even a small disruption in the chip supply chain, the ripple effect for Apple is absolutely massive. Now, chip semiconductors are essentially the brains of your iPhone. Every single function, from Face ID to your camera processing to just making a basic phone call, relies on these tiny but incredibly complex components. And right now, the factories that produce these chips, primarily based in Asia, are struggling to keep up with the enormous global demand that exploded during the pandemic when everyone suddenly needed more devices, more tech, more everything. Apple has actually acknowledged this publicly, which is a big deal because Apple doesn't usually like admitting it can't deliver. CEO Tim Cook has pointed directly to the chip shortage as a constraint on iPhone production, and that's a huge admission from a company that typically prides itself on having one of the tightest, most efficient supply chains in the world. Apple spends years building supplier relationships and locking in component supplies ahead of time, and even with all of that meticulous planning, they still got caught out by how severe this shortage has become. What makes this even more fascinating is the timing. Apple just launched some incredibly popular iPhone models, and consumer appetite for upgrading is genuinely massive right now. People are emerging from the pandemic wanting to spend, wanting new tech, and the iPhone is sitting right at the top of so many wish lists. So you have this perfect storm, record-breaking demand colliding head-on with a supply chain that simply cannot deliver the components fast enough. For investors, this is obviously a nerve-wracking situation. Wall Street watches Apple's iPhone numbers like a hawk because iPhone sales drive an enormous chunk of Apple's revenue. When Apple signals it can't meet demand, that raises real questions about quarterly earnings, about revenue projections, and about how long this shortage is actually going to last. Analysts are genuinely concerned that Apple could leave significant money on the table, billions of dollars in potential sales, simply because the chips aren't there to build the phones. And this isn't just an Apple problem, to be clear. Samsung, Google, car manufacturers, gaming console makers, everyone is fighting over the same limited pool of semiconductor supply. But because of Apple's sheer scale, their version of this problem is just so much more visible and so much more consequential for the global economy. The chip shortage is expected to ease eventually, with new manufacturing facilities being built in the United States and Europe to reduce dependence on Asian supply chains. But that takes years, not months. So in the meantime, Apple fans might need to practice some patience. And here's the thought I'll leave you with: when even the most valuable company in the world, sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars in cash, cannot simply buy its way out of a supply problem, it really makes you wonder just how fragile the technology we depend on every single day truly is.